Picture this. You are a young man running for your absolute life through the dense, unforgiving wilderness of ancient India.
Sounds terrifying, honestly.
Oh, it is. The air is thick, your lungs are burning, and you have just deeply offended one of the most powerful, ruthless kings in the known world.
Right, and this isn't a guy who just lets things go.
No, not at all. He hasn't just banished you. He has ordered your immediate, violent execution. So, exhausted and terrified, your body simply gives out.
You just can't run anymore.
Exactly. You collapse under the heavy roots of a massive tree and fall into a deep, vulnerable sleep. And sometime later, the heavy brush nearby begins to rustle.
Oh, no.
Yeah. A massive wild lion steps out of the jungle. It slowly approaches your sleeping body. But instead of tearing you to shreds, the lion lowers its massive head, gently licks the sweat from your face, and then turns and walks away, leaving you completely unharmed.
It really is an incredible image.
And if that isn't, hard enough to believe, later on, when you were preparing to fight back, a wild elephant emerges from the jungle, approaches you, and voluntarily kneels down, offering itself as your steed.
It reads beautifully, doesn't it? It sounds like a pure fairy tale, like the kind of mythological folklore you would read to a child.
Definitely.
But the wild part is that these are actually recorded historical accounts. Specifically, these events were written down by the Roman historian Justin, and they describe the origins of a very real, incredibly powerful human being.
Oh, wow.
We are talking about a man who didn't just survive that wilderness, but emerged from it to completely shatter and reshape the ancient world.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that is exactly why we are here today. Welcome to another deep dive. We are taking you on a journey into the life of Chandragupta Maurya.
The founder and the very first emperor of the Maurya Empire.
Right, who reigned from roughly 320 to 298 BCE. And our mission today is to dig into a massive, highly conflicting stack of ancient sources. I mean, we've got Greek records, Roman histories, Buddhist legends, Jain texts, and Hindu epics.
It's quite the reading list.
It really is. And they all tell a slightly different story about this single man who managed to unite the Indian subcontinent for the first time in history.
Which is no small feat.
Absolutely not. But to understand how one person manages to conquer a subcontinent, we really need to understand the absolute chaos he stepped into. You don't just wake up one day and conquer millions of people unless the system's already broken.
Chaos is putting it mildly. Let's set the geopolitical stage so we can see what Chandragupta was actually looking at. The year is roughly 325 to 323 BCE.
Okay.
In the northwest of the Indian subcontinent, Alexander the Great has just abruptly abandoned his massive Indian campaign.
Right, because his soldiers mutinied, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. They were exhausted, far from home, and honestly terrified of the rumors of massive Indian armies ahead. So Alexander turned back. And shortly after, he dies in Babylon.
Which changes everything.
Completely. This sudden, unexpected death leaves his newly established Western territories in a massive power vacuum.
Because he left a bunch of generals behind to run things, right?
He did. He left behind Greek and Macedonian provincial governors known as satraps. When Alexander died, these satraps suddenly had no central authority to report to.
So it's basically every man for himself.
Exactly. They immediately started infighting, trying to carve out their own mini-kingdoms. That's the West.
And what about the East?
Meanwhile, in the east, you have the established Nanda dynasty ruling over the Magadha Empire. The Nanda king, a man named Dhanananda, is incredibly powerful and obscenely wealthy, but he is deeply despised by his own people.
Why was he so hated?
The ancient texts describe him as cruel, oppressive, and prone to heavily taxing the population just to hoard wealth.
So you have a fracturing, disorganized foreign occupation on one side and a hated tyrannical regime on the other. I mean, it is a total powder keg waiting for a spark.
And into that powder keg steps Chandragupta.
Yeah.
But who he actually was before this moment is a total historical mystery.
Yeah, the sources are all over the place on this.
They really are. The Hindu texts, like the ancient play Mudrakshasa, suggest he came from a very humble, common background. They use terms like Vrishala, which implies a Shudra or lower-class origin.
And in the rigid social hierarchy of ancient India, being from the lowest tier meant social mobility was virtually non-existent, right? You didn't just climb the ladder to become a king.
Precisely. It was almost unheard of.
But our Buddhist sources, like the Mahavamsa, claim something totally different. They argue he was actually a nobleman who lost his status.
Right, the peacock-tamers.
Exactly. They say he was part of the Moriya clan, a Himalayan tribe that was famous for taming peacocks, which, by the way, is where the name Maurya actually comes from. Mora means peacock.
It's a great detail.
So right out of the gate, our sources can't even agree if he was a brilliant peasant or a displaced royal.
It highlights how much of his early life was rewritten later, to fit different narratives. But whether he was a peasant or a displaced prince, there is one thing every source agrees on.
He didn't do it alone.
Exactly. He did not do this alone. He didn't just wake up with the geopolitical knowledge to overthrow two empires. He had a master teacher.
Chanakya. This might be my favorite part of the entire story, because if Chandragupta is the weapon, Chanakya is the one aiming it.
That's a great way to put it.
Chanakya was a Brahmin, which means he was part of the elite scholarly and priestly class. But according to the legends, he was physically very ugly, and he was deeply insulted and publicly humiliated by the Nanda king at an almsgiving ceremony.
Yeah, the king essentially took one look at him and ordered him thrown out. It was a massive insult to a man of his intellect and status.
Talk about making the wrong enemy.
Really? So Chanakya unties his top knot of hair and swears a blood oath that he will not tie it back until the entire Nanda dynasty is destroyed.
I love that level of drama.
It's very cinematic. He flees the capital, Pataliputra, and escapes into the forest. And according to the Buddhist and Hindu legends, that is where he stumbles across a young Chandragupta.
The kid is playing a game in the dirt with his friends, right? Like a mock game of royalty.
He is. He's acting as the king. He's holding a mock court, giving orders to the other children, and dispensing justice.
And Chanakya just spots him.
Right. Chanakya stands there watching this child and immediately recognizes a raw, innate genius for leadership. The boy is decisive, charismatic, and fearless.
So what did he do?
Chanakya essentially buys the boy from a local hunter, adopts him, and takes him far away to Taxila.
And Taxila was kind of like the Ivy League university of the ancient world, right? It was a massive hub of learning.
It was the perfect incubator. For the next several years, Chanakya trains Chandragupta in everything.
We're talking military arts, ancient law, the Vedas.
And most importantly, the ruthless political strategy that Chanakya would later become famous for. He teaches the boy how to use spies, how to manipulate trade, and how to operate without mercy.
It's like he is literally building an emperor from scratch in a laboratory.
That's exactly what he's doing.
Okay, but training a prodigy in a classroom is one thing. Actually taking down two massive superpowers is something else entirely. I mean, a teenager with a good education can't just walk up to a heavily armed Greek garrison and ask them to leave.
No, they certainly cannot.
So how do they actually build an army when they have zero resources?
Well, they had to get creative. Historians still debate the exact chronology of what happened next, whether they hit the Greek governors in the Punjab first or went straight for the Nanda Empire.
Sources conflict again.
Right. But the Roman historian Justin gives us a clue. He says Chandragupta gathered a band of robbers to start his uprising.
Band of robbers.
Yeah, but modern historians interpret that not as literal street thieves, but as mercenary soldiers, disgruntled former troops, and local Republican militias who had already been resisting Alexander's occupation.
Okay, so they capitalized on the anger that was already there. They unified the fractured resistance.
Exactly. And they turned that makeshift army against the Nandas, but their first attempt was a complete disaster.
Really? What happened?
The Buddhist and Jain texts tell us that Chandragupta and Chanakya marched their new army straight at the Nanda capital of Pataliputra.
Which makes sense on paper, right? Cut off the head of the snake.
Right.
But it failed miserably. I think about this like trying to take down a massive multinational corporation. You don't just walk into the CEO's office on day one and demand the keys to the building.
No, you definitely don't.
You'll get crushed by their lawyers and security. You have to quietly buy up the regional suppliers first.
That is a brilliant way to look at it, because that is exactly the lesson they learned. They realized that they couldn't strike the heavily fortified center while the borders were still strong.
So they pivoted.
They did. Chanakya and Chandragupta completely changed their tactics. They adopted what we would today call guerrilla warfare.
How did that actually work in practice back then?
Instead of engaging in massive pitched battles, they started at the extreme frontiers of the Nanda Empire. They would isolate a single outer garrison.
Pick them off one by one.
Exactly. They would cut off its supply lines, perhaps bribe a local governor who was already tired of Dhanananda's high taxes, and take the territory. Then they would establish their own garrison and move inward, piece by piece.
Not the slow squeeze.
Yes. They slowly choked the capital from the outside in. Eventually, they besieged Pataliputra, the supply lines completely cut, and Dhanananda was defeated.
It is an unbelievable military achievement. But I have to push back a little here.
Okay, go ahead.
Is it possible his military genius is slightly overstated by history? I mean, wasn't he just incredibly lucky to capitalize on the sheer chaos of Alexander's sudden death? If Alexander doesn't die of a random fever in Babylon, does Chandragupta still win?
This raises an important question, and it's a debate that Western academics and Indian scholars have had for decades.
So what's the consensus? Was he just lucky?
Was he an opportunistic rebel who just got lucky, or a visionary strategist? To answer that, we have to look at what happens next, because his ultimate military test didn't end with the Nandas.
Right, there's a whole second act.
Around 305 BCE, long after he has taken the throne, he comes face to face with the Seleucid Empire.
Now we are talking about Seleucus I Nicator. He was one of Alexander the Great's top generals who survived the infighting and managed to take over the eastern chunk of Alexander's old empire.
Yes. Seleucus crosses the Indus River, fully intending to reclaim the Indian territories Alexander had originally conquered.
He thinks it's going to be an easy win.
He expects to find the same fractured, warring tribes Alexander faced. Instead, he runs headfirst into Chandragupta, who has now spent years consolidating a massive, battle-hardened, unified empire.
Talk about a rude awakening.
We unfortunately don't have the play-by-play tactical records of the battles that followed, but we know the outcome. The conflict ends in a massive treaty and a dynastic marriage alliance.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Chandragupta negotiates a peace deal that secures him a staggering amount of territory.
A massive amount.
He gets modern-day Pakistan and parts of Afghanistan, all the way out to the edges of Iran. And in exchange for this vast stretch of land, he gives Seleucus 500 war elephants.
That's the trade.
Now, 500 elephants sounds like a nice gift, but why would a Greek general trade half a continent for livestock?
Well, we have to pause and appreciate the sheer tactical value of what was traded here. 500 trained war elephants was an apocalyptic weapon system in the ancient world.
How so? Because the Greeks had the famous Macedonian phalanx, right? That impenetrable wall of soldiers holding 18-foot spears. How does an elephant beat that?
An elephant doesn't care about an 18-foot spear.
Good point.
When you charge an elephant into a phalanx, it simply shatters the line. It physically crushes the infantry. Furthermore, horses are naturally terrified of the smell and sound of elephants.
Oh, I didn't even think about the cavalry.
Yeah. If a Greek cavalry unit had never encountered one, their horses would panic and buck their riders before the battle even started.
Yeah.
Plus, you can put an armored tower on the elephant's back,
Like a mobile watchtower.
effectively creating a mobile, elevated platform for archers to fire down into the enemy lines.
So it literally is the ancient equivalent of handing over a fleet of heavy tanks.
It was a total game changer, and those specific elephants altered the course of Western history.
Really?
How Seleucus marched them thousands of miles all the way back to the Mediterranean and used them to absolutely crush his Greek rivals at the pivotal Battle of Ipsus in 301 BCE.
Wow.
That victory secured his own empire. Meanwhile, Chandragupta secures his entire western border without getting dragged into an endless generational war. It proved he was just as much a master of diplomacy as he was of combat.
So he wins the wars, he secures the borders, he builds the empire. But there is a massive psychological cost to seizing a throne by force.
There always is.
When your entire career is built on overthrowing a king through espionage and guerrilla warfare, you know exactly how easy it is for someone else to do it to you.
The transition from a conqueror to an administrator is always fraught with danger. But the Mauryan Empire under Chandragupta was, by all accounts, an administrative marvel.
And we have actual first-hand accounts of this, right?
We do. We know this because of Megasthenes, a Greek ambassador sent by Seleucus, who actually lived in Chandragupta's court for several years.
Oh, wow.
He documented a highly structured society. There was a complex council of ministers and specialized departments managing everything from village irrigation to standardizing weights and measures for trade.
They built a massive 1,000-mile-long highway connecting Pataliputra in the east all the way to Taxila in the northwest.
He was incredibly advanced.
And they engineered the Sudarshana Lake Reservoir in Gujarat, an enormous public works project just to ensure reliable agriculture. To a modern listener, this sounds amazing. Heavy infrastructure, low crime, economic prosperity.
It was an incredible era of growth, but you have to remember how it was maintained. Given the technology of the time, he couldn't micromanage an empire stretching from Bengal to Afghanistan.
Right, there's no internet.
He had to rely on a vast network of regional governors, forts, and trade routes. But more importantly, he relied on an incredibly dense, pervasive spy network.
The classic paranoia trap.
Spies watched the governors, and other spies watched those spies. The entire Golden Age was held together by a very delicate balance of power and surveillance.
And a heavy, heavy dose of personal terror. This is the contrast that completely blows my mind. You have this sweeping public prosperity where citizens are thriving, but Chandragupta's private life was a waking nightmare of paranoia.
It really was.
Because of how he and Chanakya had operated, he was terrified of being assassinated in his sleep.
The sources say he never slept in the same bedroom 2 nights in a row. He constantly rotated his sleeping quarters to confuse any potential assassins who might have infiltrated the palace.
He only left the palace for highly specific controlled events. Military campaigns, dispensing justice, religious sacrifices, and hunting.
Very regimented.
And when he went hunting, his personal bodyguard was made up entirely of heavily armed women. Why women?
In the political climate of ancient courts, male guards were easily bribed by rival lords who could promise them lands, titles, or political power in a new regime. Women, in that specific historical context, were largely excluded from those traditional political power structures. Therefore, they were perceived to be far less susceptible to standard treasonous bribes. They were fiercely loyal to the emperor who elevated them.
He built a fortress of a nation, but he lived like a prisoner in his own bedroom.
Which perfectly sets up the ultimate paradox of his life and one of the biggest historical controversies we have in our entire stack of sources, his final years. How does a man who conquered the known world and who is so fiercely, obsessively protective of his own life actually meet his end?
According to the Jain legends, specifically the Digambara tradition, the story takes a wildly unexpected turn.
Very unexpected.
They claim that after ruling for about 24 years, Chandragupta experienced a profound crisis of conscience. His spiritual mentor, a prominent Jain monk named Bhadrabahu, predicted a devastating 12-year famine was going to strike the empire.
And this shook him to his core.
Completely. Stricken with remorse over the massive violence of his conquests and the impending suffering of his people, Chandragupta supposedly abdicated his throne entirely, handing the empire over to his son Bindusara.
The legend says he then followed Bhadrabahu thousands of miles south, deep into modern-day Karnataka, to a place called Shravanabelagola.
Just walked away from it all.
He completely renounced his wealth, his massive empire, his crushing paranoia, and lived as a simple ascetic monk. And eventually, he ended his life through a Jain ritual called Salakana.
What exactly is that?
It's the practice of peacefully welcoming death by gradually fasting, refusing all food and water, and starving himself to death on a quiet mountaintop.
Wait. I have to call a timeout here.
Sure.
You just said the Greek ambassador Megasthenes lived in his court.
Yes, he did.
And our sources say Megasthenes explicitly documented that Chandragupta loved hunting trips and that he actively sponsored massive Vedic animal sacrifices.
That's what the Greek texts say.
It goes entirely against the core Jain principle of ahimsa, or strict nonviolence. Does a deeply paranoid, violent conqueror who loves hunting really just wake up one day and become a peaceful, fasting monk?
It's a huge shift.
Or is this just a later religion retroactively trying to claim a legendary national hero to boost their own historical prestige?
That is the million-dollar question, and you are hitting on the exact divide in the modern historical community. We have to look at the timeline of the sources.
Okay, let's look at the timeline.
The Greek accounts, like Megasthenes, are contemporary. They were written while Chandragupta was actually alive, or very shortly after. The main Digambara Jain texts that tell the complete detailed story of his abdication and his starvation, like the texts by the scholar Hemachandra, were written in the 12th century.
Wow.
That is nearly 1,400 years after Chandragupta died.
1,400 years. That's like someone today writing the definitive, unquestionable biography of a king from the Dark Ages based on local rumors.
It's a massive gap. So to impartially acknowledge the debate here, many Western academics view the Jain conversion story as highly problematic, arguing it's likely a late invention.
That makes sense.
Some scholars suggest the later Jain texts might actually be confusing Chandragupta Maurya with his great-great-grandson, a man named Samprati Chandragupta, who is historically known to have been a devout Jain.
Oh, a case of mistaken identity. And it's not just Western academics.
Right.
Even the other major Jain sect, the Svetambaras, dispute the story.
Yes, they do.
They argue that the monk Bhadrabahu never went to southern India at all, but stayed in the north near Nepal.
It is a fiercely contested history. Yet, despite the lack of contemporary evidence, there are 7th to 15th century stone inscriptions in Karnataka linking a figure named Prabhakhandra.
Who was that?
Well, later Digambara traditions say that was Chandragupta's monastic name, and those inscriptions link him to that specific mountaintop site.
Interesting.
Because there is absolutely no alternative historical record of how or when Chandragupta died, many Indian scholars and historians have accepted the Jain tradition as a working hypothesis. It remains one of the most fascinating unresolved mysteries of the ancient world.
So what does this all mean? We have a man whose life is a patchwork quilt of Greek military dispatches, Roman rumors, Buddhist morality tales, and Jain ascetic legends.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the exact specifics of how he died might actually be less important than what he left behind.
His legacy.
Exactly. Chandragupta Maurya essentially created the geopolitical blueprint for an undivided Indian subcontinent. By driving out the Greek governors and toppling the Nandas, he proved that a centralized pan-Indian empire wasn't just a political theory.
It was actually possible to build and maintain.
Yes.
And he laid the groundwork for his grandson. Because without Chandragupta building the machine, you don't get Ashoka the Great.
Absolutely.
And Ashoka is the one who uses that exact same Mauryan infrastructure, those same highways and trade routes that Chandragupta built, to spread Buddhism across all of Asia.
The administrative systems, the massive agricultural reservoirs like Sudarshana Lake, the very concept of a subcontinental identity, that all starts here.
It's why he remains a massive pop culture icon in India today, doesn't he?
Oh, everywhere. You can find commemorative stamps, stage plays, multiple television series about his life. He's even a playable leader in the video game Civilization VI. He is remembered as the architect of the first Indian nation.
It is incredible to think about. We started this deep dive with a myth. A wild lion gently licking the sweat off a sleeping, terrified fugitive in the forest.
And we ended with another one.
Right, a myth of an all-powerful emperor deliberately starving himself to death on a quiet mountain in the south. Chandragupta's life reminds us that history isn't just a dry accounting of dates and trade agreements. It is the stories we choose to tell about power, redemption, and human limits.
Well said.
The man who conquered the known world, who feared for his life so much he hid behind armed guards and rotating bedrooms, might have ended his life by deliberately giving up everything, down to his very next meal.
It's a powerful thought.
It leaves you wondering. As we live through our own chaotic times, surrounded by our own massive political shifts, how much of our own modern history will be remembered as hard fact, and how much will inevitably become the magical lion-taming myths of tomorrow? Keep digging, keep questioning, and join us next time on The Deep Dive.